Last week, we finished Maverick's ongoing series, and I was left with some lingering thoughts. I wanted to talk about the overall tone of the book, the characters' futures, why the book was cancelled, and do my pitch for how a few minor structure changes could improve the final 4 issues. However, episode 10.9 was getting pretty long, so I cut a lot of that material out. I figured that it would be better to do a legacy/wrap-up episode to explore those ideas than to just throw them all away. This also gave 10.9 some breathing room for some of my thoughts there, so hopefully this ends up being a good thing for everyone. My name is Ben, and this is Comic Book Breakdown episode 10.10, Maverick. Mission complete. One of the ideas that I brought up in our overall series was that Maverick's solo book was inspired by spy stories. This isn't me talking out of my butt either. We saw several references to James Bond, including Brian calling Isabel Maverick's Q, and the Red Guardian's name being a nod to From Russia with Love. But the most outright telling thing to me happened in our very first issue. When Maverick returned to the Chateau Frontenac and we got our title and credits page, there's a dedication to the memory of Ian Fleming and James O'Halloran. Ian Fleming was a British author, best known for creating the James Bond novels. I'm not sure who James O'Halloran is, though. I could only find a young Australian actor with the same name in a Google search, which seems like an unlikely reference. O'Halloran seems to have no connection to Ian Fleming or 007. I did find mention of an O'Halloran in a book about Cold War-era spies, which is perfect for the kind of stories that inspired Maverick, but I only found the last name or the covert name as O'Halloran. There was no mention of a James. So if anyone has some more insight into this, I'm sure that I would appreciate knowing more. Despite my failure there, this shout-out to Ian Fleming cements the kind of story that Jorge Gonzalez was trying to tell. Did he properly convey that idea in the book? Yeah, I think so. We've got assassins brainwashing, torturing a former intelligence operative as a villain who is Russian, and weapons of mass destruction threatening the world. Maverick himself definitely borrows some of Bond's classical elements, including being distant, sleeping with a beautiful lady, and relying on technological toys to get him through missions. I don't feel that Gonzalez did a lot to play with the morality of such a life, though. We open the book with Maverick dying and thinking about his glory days. Lots of spying and killing and adrenaline pumping action. Then he dies and comes back and asks himself, what does he do with his life? This is the perfect chance for him to choose to be a hero, especially with a kid like Chris looking up to him. The series then could have explored how difficult that not only makes Maverick's kind of missions, but demonstrates how futile and stupid that not killing a monster like Sickle or Pushkin is. Instead, Maverick bounces from one crisis to the next, only deciding not to kill at the very end of issue 12 for almost no reason. And even when he spares Sickle, he then kicks Omega Red off a cliff face. And yeah, it's very likely that Omega Red could survive a fall off of a cliff face, but it's still you almost killed this guy. I do think that Gonzalez is really playing with Maverick's background as a tactical fighter, and that he highlighted those abilities frequently. That's smart, and Gonzalez does have Maverick act with little thought or concern for those around him. Maverick has been a solo operative for nearly a decade in Marvel time at this point. He wouldn't get along well with characters like Elena or Brian in his life. Otherwise, I would argue that I think that Maverick feels too normal here. The Maverick that I read in Wolverine 87 or the Maverick one-shot was blunt, critical, and colder. You could argue that his time spent with Elena softened him up, or that he changed after his near-death experience. But it kind of takes away from the personality that I liked, and it makes him someone else. I will freely admit that he is not badly written here, but he certainly feels less interesting to me at the end of this than he did at the beginning of this. I wish the personal elements of Maverick's background played more of a role in the book as well. We saw this with Wolverine all of the time in the 90s, as old enemies, allies, or missing friends and family members would pop up to make trouble for him. I kept expecting Janetta to reappear, saved after Nord fled her murder, or for his brother Andreas to be alive. I legitimately thought that Andreas was the Confessor, but that never happened. Underutilizing Maverick's past keeps it from interacting with his present, which makes it a less important story point overall, and this is really highlighted by the whole Barrington plotline. That story affected nothing, and changed nothing once it was closed. And a story that does nothing is a story that doesn't need to be told. Elena and Brian make for an interesting supporting cast. Elena should have as complicated a history as Maverick as a former KGB operative, but she does little in this book of her own agency. The one thing that she does do, attack Sabretooth, is done so poorly that it frustrated me that it happened at all. You're a former KGB agent, Elena. I am a geek with a 12th grade education, and even I know not to follow a predator into its killing ground. I would have loved to have seen Elena work as Maverick's handler, providing intelligence before he goes on a job, or building cover IDs for those jobs, and setting up local contacts for him. Elena could have been M to Maverick's Bond. Oh, that's such a wasted opportunity. Curse you, cancellation. Where Elena and Maverick feel more like partners, though, Brian is the student. I would have loved to have seen Maverick's mercenary lifestyle have more of an impact on Brian, though. Like, he's fighting bullies in his school, or he starts doing vigilante work. Brian was constantly portrayed as an angry young man, but very rarely did he ever do anything with that anger. To some degree, that is understandable. I mean, Brian is a relatively normal kid. But that's not interesting. Black Alice joined a team of morally deficient supervillains in Secret Six, and here, the worst thing that Brian does is run away to visit his crush. Oh, and also, why couldn't Maverick have given Donna a chatterbox at the end of issue 4? I know Isabel said that she gave Maverick her last one, but I bet that Brian would have been way happier to securely chat with the crush that he had than with Maverick. I certainly know that I would have been. The short stories in issues 9 through 11 were good beginner stories for Brian as his own character, and I do think that they were a solid first step in him becoming Bolt, even if they do end up going nowhere because the book ended too fast. Brian becoming Bolt is something that would eventually happen. In 1999, Marvel relaunched New Warriors with Volume 2, and in it, Brian Johnson is back to being Chris Bradley, and he moves to New York City, puts on a costume, and joins the team. The book only lasted for 11 issues, and skimming over it here, I can honestly say that I don't remember almost anything that happened in that comic. I remember that when Chris moved to New York, he was homeless for a while before moving in with Donna, which, I mean, I guess is interesting, but I don't know why he wouldn't have moved in with Donna to begin with, but I've got nothing else. I own those books. I have read those books. It's just lacking any impression in my mind. That's normally a bad sign. Elena Ivanova has yet to appear at all anywhere, although Maverick definitely has. After the ending of issue 12 in 1998, we don't see Maverick again until, technically, the Weapon X Agent Zero one-shot in 2002, 4 years later. I say technically because we aren't told the identity of Agent Zero for most of the run, and it's only when a new Maverick confronts Weapon X that we heard about the tragic stories that happened there. The Weapon X ongoing series also played a big role in Chris's journey, eventually, as that's where we see him next following the cancellation of New Warriors Volume 2. Other than Sabretooth, Blob, and Omega Red, we don't see any of the villains that appear here again. Not Pushkin, not Hammer and Sickle, not even the Confessor. All of them have potential to me, but one, Pushkin is largely active in Russia, and almost nothing is ever set in Russia in American comics, And 2, none of them are very interesting. Pushkin is somehow both a genius and a fool, both too stupid to pull off anything impressive, but too ambitious to just sit on his heels. Hammer and Sickle are just a hair above one-note lackeys for most of this run. I'll admit, their names are great, the weapons are iconic, but their designs lack personality, and then their actual lack of personality certainly doesn't help. I would like to point out that Gonzalez refers to the pair of them as gypsies throughout the length of this run, as opposed to Roma. I chose to correct this, as my understanding is that the word gypsy is a slur, and I just wanted that known before anybody read the books themselves and they were outraged to find the terminology. To me, the Confessor had the most potential as a villain, as his overall gimmick is pretty sweet. I'd have loved to have seen that religious aspect of him heightened, though. Give him a staff with a cross, but it can fire energy bolts, or if you grasp near the top and he can draw a sword out of it, that would be cool. Or arm him with a spear, which he then refers to as the Spear of Destiny. Or you could arm him with a censer, but instead of filling it with incense, have it filled with like knockout gas or poison or acid. Oh my god, he could swing it and launch acid at his enemies, burning the sinners with quote-unquote holy water. I'd have liked to have seen him judge more too, as if he was God's killing tool on earth, as opposed to just a money-hungry capitalist. You could even have him donate the fees that he gets for assassinating to the church, which could be his own form of penance for killing the unrighteous. Again, there is a lot that you could do with this kind of concept, but Gonzalez ultimately does so little. To me, that last sentence really sums up Gonzalez's tenure as a writer on this book. He does so little with what's available to him. I can't help but compare Maverick to Gail Simone's Catman, who she not only rebuilt from the ground up, but then sent on morally torturous journeys. Here, Maverick faces no moral issues, no larger-than-life problems, and the whole book just ends up feeling kind of empty. I don't feel like I experienced anything here. I just read what happened. And that leaves me feeling dissatisfied overall with the book. Sure, Gonzalez wraps everything up by the end, other than our cliffhanger, but it still feels unsatisfying. Other than some small projects for Marvel, Gonzalez would end up going into the film industry, and did work on The Good Shepherd, American Gangster, Leatherheads, The Happening, Shutter Island, and a number of other movies and TV shows. He also wrote the Mystique and Sabretooth 4-issue miniseries for Marvel, and I only bring that up because it also featured 2 villainous characters going up against an evil organization, and again, it just fits those themes: covert operations, killing people, super criminals, right up his alley. Gonzalez even did some work on DC's Young Justice Season 4 cartoon, which I heard is pretty good, so he clearly has done pretty well for himself since the cancellation of Maverick. Penciler Jim Cheung is a personal fave, and after Maverick, he moved on to Marvel's X-Force. In 2000, he joined CrossGen Comics, drawing their sci-fantasy comic Scion, and that's where I really fell in love with his work. Once CrossGen went under, Cheung returned to Marvel and has done a number of high-profile books like launching and creating the Young Avengers and Avengers the Children's Crusade, as well as other works. Cheung's style has only gotten better over the years as he's become practiced, becoming even more detailed and cleaner. I think that modern coloring really helps as well, as nowadays his colors feel like they pop more compared to the work that was done here on Maverick. I still feel that he was a bad choice overall for this Maverick ongoing series, but I do think that he gave it his all and that he did a great job regardless. It just doesn't fit the tone. Leo Fernandez, aka Leandro Fernandez, went on to be a pretty successful guy himself. He did some Hulk comics with author Bruce Jones, some Wolverine issues with Greg Rucka, and that is pretty impressive to me, and he did a good little streak of Punisher issues with Garth Ennis. Wow. Oh, and he did an arc of New Mutants Volume 3. I have actually read that one. I didn't recognize Fernandez's artwork at all, I'm sad to say, but I am glad that he's found some measure of success in the industry. This overall series has left me feeling, I think, unimpressed is the best way to put it. Like, Venom Lethal Protector had flaws, but it ended with me excited for where Venom's life was going. Secret Six ended wistfully for me, as I knew that version of those characters was gone, but I was satisfied overall. Maverick has some good pieces to it, and a lot of potential, but it's so underwhelmingly written that even if it hadn't gotten canceled, I don't think that would have helped the book. So here, I'll give you an example. Here's what I would have done with issues 9 through 12. Maverick and Pushkin know that Vivant is the only man who can give Maverick answers about Barrington. But Pushkin hates Maverick and enjoys toying with him, so why let him pursue those answers? Pushkin could hire the Confessor to kill Vivant, who strikes just as Maverick confronts Vivant. Maverick does his best to fight the Confessor, but Vivant's contentious attitude distracts Maverick, and the Confessor ends up killing him. Hurt by the loss of his old friend and lack of answers, Maverick attacks the Confessor in a rage, which makes him sloppy. The Confessor toys with Maverick the whole time and leaves, but not before telling Maverick that Pushkin is the one who hired him, essentially redirecting Maverick. Maverick is pissed. No swearing. That guy. But he doesn't know where to find him. So Maverick reaches out to his contacts and he's introduced to the new Red Guardian, who is also investigating Pushkin. Neither trusts the other, but they also don't want to do this alone, so they team up and infiltrate Pushkin's base. Red Guardian's goal is to save lives, Maverick's is to get answers and revenge. They'll find Pushkin with hammer and sickle, and Maverick charges in, his outstretched hands going for Pushkin, which is when Omega Red's tendrils snake out and grab him. Hammer and sickle capture Red Guardian, and we end issue 9. One of my biggest problems with this run is how random it seems for Pushkin to target Maverick initially, so we can fix that here as well. Issue 10 has Maverick and Red Guardian in shackles. Pushkin, as a former intelligence operative, knows that the Red Guardian works for the government, so he suspects that they're getting desperate. Why, after all, would they hire Maverick to accompany Red Guardian? Maverick jumps in, saying that he tagged along as part of a recon team, but more are coming. Wink, wink. Red Guardian picks up on this and backs up Maverick, trying to act tough and like there are more of them than there really are. So Pushkin has them separated. Sickle can question Red Guardian. Pushkin will handle Maverick. Maverick is here for answers, so he starts demanding them from Pushkin, and Pushkin plays along. Because, really, why would Maverick trust anything that Pushkin says? If Pushkin says yes, Barrington did work with Janetta, would Maverick believe him? What if he said no? His computer files could be doctored to say whatever Pushkin wants them to say. In fact, how does Maverick know that the mind-controlled devices stopped working? Pushkin will suggest the idea that he came back because those devices are still working and he wanted Maverick to come back. My point here is to show how utterly futile it is to expect answers about his long-lost past when Maverick should be focused on his present. This does get Maverick all tangled up. Is Pushkin lying? Is he telling the truth? Is Maverick being controlled again? This is when Pushkin hits him with the big reveal. He sent Janetta. We were told that Janetta was informing on Christoph and Cell 6 to the Russians. Did Maverick really never ask who she was informing to? This is why Pushkin kidnapped Maverick way back in issue 1. This is why he's torturing him now. It's fun. Pushkin got to watch his agent manipulate Christoph Nord and break him. Look at Maverick. He's pushed away anyone who cared. He's become cold, distant, hard. Why, if Pushkin didn't know better, he could think that Maverick was Russian. Everything that Maverick has become, he owes to Pushkin's manipulations. This would really mess with Maverick's head. He is horrified, disgusted, relieved, sad, angry, sick, everything all at once. He accused Barrington, his friend, over nothing. He has let this monster live all these years. While he's caught up in all of these emotions, Pushkin says that Maverick is the perfect soldier, all thanks to him. So let's make this official. He should work for him. Having made his offer, Pushkin leaves the room, giving Maverick some time to stew on it. Here, my goal is to force Maverick to choose who he is. He is as Pushkin shaped him to be, and Maverick hates himself for becoming that. All of his seemingly wise, bitter, cynical life has been shaped by the man who ruined it. And it's gotten him exactly where? Trapped in a dark cell, alone and beaten, his only friends thousands of miles away. And it's really his friends who redeem him. Yes, he might push people away, but Isabel has saved him in the past. Brian and Elena are counting on him to come home. They can see the hero that Maverick is, that he tries so hard not to be, but that he could be if he chose to. Whatever happened in his past, Maverick decides here and now who he is and what he does. So he escapes the cell, somehow, and frees Red Guardian. Red Guardian is beaten, but alive, and Maverick compliments him on not cracking, honestly impressed. The pair disable some guards because this issue needs some kind of violence, and they then discover that they are on a massive transport craft. They find the Ready Room and Pushkin's plans to track, attack, and loot an AIM facility. Pushkin's bits about this can have been shown basically the same as before throughout the last issue and this one. He invites AIM over, spikes their food with expensive nanotech, and he wants to rob them. I added in the idea that the nanotech was expensive to give Pushkin some more stakes in this. He's trying to move up in the crime lord world to a super crime lord, messing with groups like AIM and Hydra, but doing so should mean that he has to put a lot on the line. Without a success here, Pushkin will go broke, having spent so much money on Omega Red and the rare nanotech that he's using. Issue 11 can largely play the same, actually. Maverick and Red Guardian try to disable the craft, the attack is launched, they bail out, then they move inside. Maverick pitches a plan to the Guardian and volunteers to go after Sickle, but really, he's headed to the comms unit. He does fight Sickle, and yes, he chooses to spare Sickle because he doesn't want to be a killer anymore. He activates the comm unit, and we cut away to the Red Guardian. He'll disable the biohazard material, he'll encounter Hammer, Maverick will show up to ally with him, and Red Guardian still ends up wounded. Pushkin can activate a self-destruct on his way out, forcing Maverick to disable it and save Red Guardian. The issue can end with Pushkin escaping. To me, this showcases Maverick choosing to save one life at the cost of his revenge. And even Red Guardian will be like, "You should have left me to die if that's what it took to stop Pushkin," here at the end. But the whole point of the self-destruct sequence is really to buy narrative time. Because issue 12 opens with the craft flying off and Red Guardian cursing Maverick for allowing Pushkin to escape. Maybe he even accuses Maverick of being a double agent, working for Pushkin all along. But Maverick is largely unaffected, because suddenly he can hear Elena's voice in his mind, and that throws him. Pushkin's aircraft suddenly comes under fire as the X-Men's Blackbird streaks into the sky and opens fire on them. Maverick explains to the Guardian that he called for backup, realizing that the stakes here were too high for just two dudes. One of Pushkin's engines will blow, and the craft will start to go down, so the X-Men head toward Maverick. Wolverine greets him, along with Elena and Bolt, who is sporting his own costume. Maybe it's like an X-Men training uniform or something, but yeah. Maverick called the X-Men earlier in the issue, but they were already on their way. Remember when I had Maverick and Red Guardian find the map of Pushkin's plans? Well, Elena was seeing through Maverick's eyes there, and so she reached out to the X-Men first. They all climb into the Blackbird, find Pushkin's crashed craft, and attack. Pushkin will threaten to detonate or release the one anthrax missile that he escaped with. He will kill everyone there if they don't stand down. And Maverick is the first one who does, shocking them all. But he'd noticed that Bolt has snuck around behind Pushkin. Bolt will fry the electronics in the missile. He probably fries Pushkin to some degree too. Maverick will then walk up, punch Pushkin one last time, and he's out. Throw in some cool fights between the X-Men, Hammer and Sickle, and Omega Red, and this is dope. But the whole point of it is to bring Pushkin to justice, showcasing that Maverick is willing to trust people and highlighting his growth as a character over these issues. I do like the idea of someone escaping though, like maybe Hammer and Sickle, who can either pick up Pushkin's operations and become big bads in their own right, or maybe they return later to break Pushkin out of jail in an epilogue. But now Pushkin is scarred or something thanks to Bolt's electrical blast, so he's got a more villainous overall appearance. I certainly won't say that my pitch is perfect. The X-Men would need to go from New York State to Florida to pick up Elena and Brian, and then go to the Swiss Alps in like 10 minutes, and that's just silly. The Blackbird is a fast aircraft, sure, but it ain't that fast. Plus, this also makes the victory feel more like an X-Men victory and not a Maverick victory, and it certainly creates more of a bond between the X-Men and Maverick, as opposed to distancing Maverick as his own man within the Marvel Universe. I would argue the fact that this book is cancelled means that it's okay to do such a thing. After all, Maverick is about to become a supporting B-list character again, so why not strengthen his ties to the X-Men? I'm sure that if Gonzalez did exactly what I would suggested, I would be sitting here complaining about the exact same points that I'm pointing out, and, sometimes you just can't win, man. But sometimes you can find something that you never knew that you needed. A frequent emailer of the show, who goes by Indifferent Orbiter, told me that they knew about Maverick when this series began, but they couldn't remember where from. But then it clicked for them, and they sent me a picture of a Team X/Team 7 graphic novel. I had never heard of this. I immediately began researching it, and I just knew that I had to have it. So join me next week for a cross-company crossover as I break down Marvel's Team X/Wildstorm's Team 7, the graphic novel. Everyone, there are a million podcasts vying for your time and attention, and I'd like to thank you for listening to mine. If you would like to get in touch with me to share a concern, request a series, compliment me, berate me, whatever you like, send me an email at cbbreakdown@gmail.com. Otherwise, thanks for listening.